Really happy to welcome to the show today my good friend and current FBI director. He's got a lot going on, so I appreciate his time. Director Kash Patel. Kash, welcome to the show. Good to have you.
Dan, we miss you, and congratulations on the relaunch of your epic show. America needs it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, buddy. It was great to work there. I was really proud of the work we put together in the past year. And, spoke to the president about it. He was our first guest. I'm happy to have you on. Let's get right to it. There was another episode up north of trans violence. You know, when you and I were over there at the FBI, they had not specifically produced a good, deep analytical product on what is in this outbreak of trans violence we've seen, whether it's in Minnesota or Nashville. But as you know, over there's a limited number of FBI assets. There's about 38,000 employees. You got to triage your threats. This is a real threat. We've seen it over and over again, and it's important that we produce a product to see what's going on here and analyze the core of this problem.
Well, look, you hit one of the things that we reformed immediately in our first year, Dan, which is intelligence. Intelligence drives operations. And if you refuse to believe the actual intelligence because of the media narrative that used to politicize the FBI, then you're going to get it wrong every time. And what do? We looked at the facts and the evidence. We saw a stream of violence related to transgender ideology that led to unfortunate deaths and assassinations, and we took action.
Yeah, we did. And also on another related topic, Antifa. I covered earlier in my show today and in yesterday's show how the prior FBI director and the prior president, Biden, and even Obama had played down the Antifa threat. It's an idea. You and I know that's bullshit. It's not an idea when actual action follows the idea. There was an action product that resulted from said ideas. Also, with the Prairie Land investigation and others, there's been actual action to take down and dismantle this entire ring of people.
You're right. We set out to actually activate intelligence-based operations. This includes Antifa. And Dan, you know this. How many people were arrested related to Prairie Land? We're over 24 federal arrests. We're in the middle of federal trial in 5 of those defendants this week again in Texas. 19 people have been convicted for acts of violence related to Antifa. It's in the indictment. You don't got to believe me or you. Everybody can go read the public indictment. And it didn't just happen there. It happened in Cop City in Georgia, where we had to go rearrest everybody because the state authorities couldn't get their act together to produce the enough information to take that to trial, so we did. And it's not a creation or manufacturing of information. It exists. It's just a willingness that you and I and this building's new leadership took to say, we're going to look at the facts that exist. We're not going to try to make up facts that don't so we can serve a political narrative. And wait till you, and I know you know this, but wait till you see what's coming in the next month or two on the funding streams related to this. You and I had launched a serious investigation. We had said these organizations don't operate alone, don't operate in silence. They operate with a heavy, heavy stream of funding. And we started looking into it, and guess what, Dan? We found them.
Director, your thoughts on this? I covered earlier in the show that there's a reason a lot of these politicized, weaponized bureaucrats try to avoid talking about Antifa as an organized group of threat actors. What they wanted to do is they wanted to have all the benefits of organizing: money, publicity, the ability to use social media to tell people to show up and throw rocks and bricks. They wanted to have all of that, but they didn't want to face the legal penalties. Being an attorney and now being on the FBI side, the investigative side, that the government forbids that type of criminal organization through RICO statutes, VICAR, and other things. So they want it one way. They want to organize and use it. But then when it comes to saying, well, they're organizing it for this purpose, they say, oh, no, that's not an organization. It's just an idea.
Now, listen, they are retreating and backtracking through a wall that they used to be able to break through under prior administrations because no one held them accountable. And now, after the first year that we reestablish how this place, how this building, how this lead premier law enforcement agency actually operates and goes after not just threat actors overseas and those who are willing to do harm to American lives, but those who cause violence here in America and use the guise of politics to delete that violence. We're not going to tolerate that. And these groups like Antifa and anyone else involved in these riots across the country and involved in paying for them in any way, shape, or form, this FBI FBI, thanks to what we stood up over the last year, has made significant headway under the NSPM 7 process in looking at those who funded these streams and are starting to arrest people who used their funds to incite violence in the guise of political peaceful protest.
You know, Director, one of the things you did early on is to establish, you know, what they call in business school, like BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, right? You put these 4 principles up on the home screen for everybody's computer every day. They had this, like, you know, National Dog Day stuff going up, which was nice and cute, but that's, you know, it's the FBI. Let's go get bad guys. One of them's crush violent crime. The other, on the national security front, protect the homeland. So on the crush violent crime front, when we got in there, there was a heavy focus on a lot of things. The FBI has a lot of responsibilities. But you had said early on, listen, if the Americans don't feel safe in their neighborhoods, I don't give a damn where you live, Chicago, Tuscaloosa, doesn't matter to us, then we're failing at our job. Like, that is national security, the ability to walk out of your house and go to a bus stop without your kid getting mugged or stabbed or having some drug slinger. And we reprioritized. That led to, under your leadership over there, with President Trump at the top and the AG's support, a historic drop in violent crime, not just the lowest levels we've seen in modern American history, but historic percentage drops too. It's really simple. You go and get bad guys off the street. I mean, you and I both agreed on this. You know, listen, I think you and I did a pretty good job. You know, it really isn't hard when you focus them on the bad guys.
Well, it's not hard, Dan, as you know, as an 1811 and a former police officer. It's not hard to do the job you signed up for if you're allowed to do the job you signed up for. And President Trump and this administration backs law enforcement and gave us the resources at this FBI and gave us the autonomy in you and I in running this building to remove the red tape, to remove the unnecessary approvals, and to get 1,000 extra agents. That's what we did, Dan. We put 1,000 agents into the field from Washington, D.C. We permanently removed them from the National Capital Region and sent them across to every single field office. And what did that do? It allowed people to hit the streets and investigate crimes, and it led to this. And I know you've seen this, but this is 1 year in the making of true historic reductions in crime. And you're talking about a 20% reduction in murder rate. You're talking about a 32% increase in fentanyl seizures, enough to kill 150 million Americans. Dan, you're talking about 4 top 10 arrests in 1 year, but as soon as you left, I had to add 2 more. So now we're up to 6. You know, I couldn't let it stand at 4. So in 1 calendar year, we arrested 6 of the FBI's most wanted fugitives in the world.
You know what I'm talking about. I was busting my ass on that one, but you know, I was like, you know. So, but hey, good job. Once I saw it on the news, I was proud of you and the guys.
No, you laid it, and you gotta let you know those 6 go to you. You laid the groundwork for it. You work quietly behind the scenes. I'm just telling you. And look, I think the audience should know. I can't even memorize these. I look at these every day, and it's just hard to believe. 490% increase in those who prey upon our children. 490% increase in arrests by the FBI. The FBI under the last year, twice as many increase for violent crime from 24 to 25. Twice as many arrests. That's unbelievable, Dan. These numbers are truly historic, and that was the foundational tectonic shift you and I put into place in the FBI to let the cops go out there and be cops, and this is what happens.
And one of the things I know I've heard you emphasize a lot in interviews, and I try to hammer home too, is it's not possible without the leadership of a president who allows you to work. Now, you've worked for, in the D.C. atmosphere for a lot longer than I had. I was a Secret Service agent, but I was not a political actor in any way. You kind of just observe it like a fly on the wall. But when you have someone breathing down your neck every 5 minutes, micromanaging every decision you make, rather than allowing you to go work, the president, he's a spreadsheets guy. I want the homicide rate and the crime rate down. He's not going to sit there every 5 minutes and micromanage every decision. If you're acting appropriately within the bounds of the Constitution, following the rules and engaging in the process and getting it done, he just wants it done. But him allowing us to work, especially after early on the successes of Viper, Operation Viper, the violent crime operation in Tennessee, he saw the results and said, guys, we got to expand this nationwide. There's no reason we can't replicate this in cities across the country.
I think you just hit upon the brilliance of true leadership in what President Trump said to you and I. He said, go reduce violent crime. Go defend the homeland. Stop children from overdosing. and let's protect our children online. Those are some of the priorities issued to us. But he didn't say, this is how you do it, go do it, and I want it done this way. He gave us the priorities. You and I said, Roger that, boss. That's what the administration and the American public voted for. And then what do we do, Dan? You engineered operations like Summer Heat and Viper, and we went to places like Memphis and D.C. and elsewhere, and we saw a 60% reduction in the homicide rate in Memphis in the first 3 months that the FBI was on the ground there. We've been replicating that in city by city across the country. We've been focusing on Indian country, which has not gotten the attention it should have. We've been focusing on every piece of crime that has been ignored historically. And what else did we do? We put new leadership into the field that subscribed to this leadership and this administration's agenda, because that's what happens, and that's what the American people voted for. And for the FBI, it just means letting good cops be cops, and we let them go out there and arrest the bad guys. And when you arrest, Dan, I don't remember the number, but I think it's 68,000 arrests for the FBI last year alone. I think that's twice as many as the year before.
Kash, let's do some myth busting here, because there's a lot of unfortunate BS out there in the media. Now, everybody, knows they have an agenda. That's fairly obvious. But you see all these catastrophic apocalyptic headlines, Patel's FBI made the country less safe. Okay. I don't understand what your data is to back that up. CT arrests, counter-terror arrests are up. Counter-espionage arrests are up. Violent crime arrests, you just said, are up, not only up, but up dramatically. The national crime rate's the lowest we've seen in recorded history. The homicide rate's the lowest, I think, since 1900. Who even knows if they had accurate data back? Maybe the lowest ever. It's just, these are really insane numbers, especially when you consider the multitude of ways now and threats evolving that people can hurt and maim and harm each other, that these crime rates have plunged. So listen, you're entitled to your opinion, and I will vigorously always protect the right to freedom of the press. But you should at least bedrock it in some facts. What are they? I don't understand what they're basing that on outside of their own animosity towards the Trump administration.
That's it. It's animosity towards this administration and anyone who actually effectuates to get it done. Just think about, we just got to hit pause for a second, Dan. Why is it that we had such an explosion in crime to deal with in the first place? Because the prior administration did not prioritize fighting crime and instead allowed an open border policy and an open crime policy to infiltrate our communities. Dan, when you have 100,000 Americans dying of drug overdoses in 1 year, that's not a small problem. That is a crisis. And if it happened under any other administration, they would be blaming said administration. But instead, President Trump gets elected. This FBI comes in, addresses the 4 years of failure and weaponization of law enforcement, reprioritizes to go after the espionage actors, to go after the terrorists, to go after the narco traffickers, to go after the murderers, to go after the child rapists and the human traffickers. And we are up double digits, if not triple digits, on every single one of those categories. So the questions has to be asked, how did this happen? Well, it happened in the prior administration. The answer, this administration under Trump and this FBI and this Department of Justice delivered historic results. And the only way you can argue with that is if you have political animosity, because there is no lying in these stats. There is no lies in these statistics. We literally showed people coming off airplanes, doing operations, doing things, and this FBI participating in everything from Maduro to Ryan Wedding to Abbey Gate capture to the Benghazi attack capture. We have not stopped because we set this bureau on a trajectory that it has not seen in decades.
It's interesting being outside on the other side now, reading kind of, the whole cornucopia of media coverage about what went on there. And then you see, one side saying, well, we haven't seen a focus on public corruption. And you see the other side saying there's been too much of a focus on public corruption. I'm serious. You've seen it. You're like, well, one of those is obviously not true. The FBI is always going to remain focused on public corruption. Just you and I, and I know you going forward, with Rhea and Bailey over there, are going to continue to focus on rooting out root and branch public corruption. You had the Letitia James case, you had the Comey case, you had the Bolton case, you've got the Kathy Hochul staffer case, you got the Gavin Newsom chief of staff case, you got the New Orleans mayor. There was that police department case we had. These were really serious cases, but being an attorney, these things take time. We're not the Department of War. We just don't engage in, kinetic action. This is a law enforcement operation that has to build cases over time. But in 1 year, there's been a lot done. And like I said, one of those stories has got to be a myth because they're both saying opposite things.
Well, it just goes to the theme that we've been talking about the mainstream media. They've been saying two things the entire time. Well, which one is it? Because they both, as you said, can't be true. If what they're saying is true, then we're lying about the arrest you just listed off. If what they're saying is true, then we're lying that we arrested John Bolton and indicted him. If what they're saying is true, then you and I and the FBI are lying about the dozens of police officers we arrested for a multi-year public corruption scandal down in the southeastern portion of the United States and everybody else that you're talking about. Then which one is true? And so I think the media, and you would know this better than I, at the core of it knows how successful this FBI has been, and they hate that it's this FBI that delivered it and not the prior administration's FBI. And I truly believe that that is the reason for it, because when you and I traveled around the country, what happened when we went to towns across America? I know it happened to you. People came up to us, moms and pops came up to us from every town, every corner we went to and said, thank you to you and this Trump administration for keeping our kids safe and keeping our murderers off the streets and keeping the drugs out of our communities and letting our children have a safe environment to grow up in. I heard it over and over again. It's not something you and I personally did. It's what this FBI delivered while we were leading it, and we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, that's why I say to folks all the time, I don't like when people say, well, Twitter, X, it's not the real world. It is the real world. People have real opinions. I understand that. But I'm just telling you, I mean it from the bottom of my, sometimes broken heart, man. I did. I traveled around. I never heard anything but good news from people about the progress that was being made. Of course, there's a lot to fix. No one's suggesting everything's done. There's a lot more work to be done, as you know. I was explaining to the audience, in my first show, how when actors are at your level in the government, when people are principals and deputies and a cabinet level or cabinet kind of equivalent positions, everything's a level 10 decision, Kash. Yeah. A level 10 meaning there's a pardon the language, but a shitty decision and a shittier one. Because if there was a good decision to be made, someone else made it. And then when those decisions, that's every day. I know you know this because I would knock on your door and you'd be like, what now? And I'd be like, here we go again. Like something else will come up. But I just want to put into perspective for folks out there, when that decision can't even be made by me, it goes to you. When it doesn't go to you, it goes like to the president's desk. He's dealing with like level 11 decisions. And that's the thing in DC is that's why the batting average isn't always going to be 1,000. There's no good call to be made or someone else would have made it. There's just really tough decisions where, there's a shit call and a shittier call. And listen, that's what we signed up for. That's how it rolls.
Look, yeah, these are difficult decisions, Dan. That's why you volunteered to jump back in. It wasn't just going to be, hey, we're going to do this job. It's going to be super easy. We're not going to have to make any hard decisions, and we're not going to have to combat a press corps that has largely been biased and full of inaccurate reporting. But we made those decisions collectively in the best interest of the nation. And if we hadn't, then none of this would be true. None of this would be possible. If President Trump had made the hard decisions to allow us and give us the resources that we need and to back the blue in law enforcement and to prioritize working with state and local authorities, then we wouldn't be able to do what we did. But you're right. We had a lot of hard decisions, and that comes with the territory of the job. But once you look outside of the cauldron of Washington, D.C., and this is one of the things that, I'm trying to remind myself of every day, outside of here, there is a different America than the one that lives in the national capital region. And I try to remind myself every day when making those difficult decisions that you talked about that we make on a daily basis that we are making a decision collectively for the rest of America, not just for the minority of people that are living part-time in Washington, D.C., pulling the levers on Capitol Hill and such.
Kash, I know you're busy here, so I'll wrap it up with this. But I think this is the most important question. You get the President's Daily Brief, the PDB, every morning. It's called the PDB because they brief the president, but the principals across the IC and elsewhere do get access to that, and you get pretty much everything the president gets in that item. I'm not even allowed to say how the delivery mechanism, but when you're getting that brief, they told me that day one. When you're getting that brief, the threats now. When you see the president speaking about things like a bigger footprint in Greenland and the Monroe Doctrine of hemispheric dominance in this part of the global hemisphere, The president's basing that on a threat you see every morning. And these threats are not the threats from the 60s. You have things that are out there in the media, the attacks on the grid, typhoon. You have potential, EMP attacks. You have hypersonic missiles. You have threats from space, underwater, everywhere. The president, Ratcliffe, Tulsi, you're seeing that every single day. Some of the stuff you see in the media, it's amazing to watch an 18-year-old journalist with no experience in any of this stuff critique a lot of what the president's doing without any of the background to see why he's doing it. They're fair to do it, freedom of speech, but when you see it from the other side, it makes a lot more sense what he's talking about.
And Dan, you know why it's called the President's Daily Briefing? Because the president decides what are the intel priorities in that briefing. And President Trump has decided what intel priorities agencies like the FBI and CIA are to act upon. That type of leadership is what has led to the historic reduction in crime. That type of leadership is what led to us capturing 6 of the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives. That type of leadership got us the Abbey Gate bomber and the Benghazi bomber on top of the 6. That type of leadership, Dan, you know this, enabled us to do the Maduro operation, which the FBI played a role in, and all these other operations, most of which we can't talk about, but that type of leadership led to a 35% increase in espionage actors by this FBI alone. And what the president doesn't get enough credit for is he's the one that directs the intelligence in the presidential daily briefing to set the priorities for this FBI to act. And this FBI is able to act because he has the foresight to see what evidence, what intel needs to be actioned, and what evidence and what intel is garbage. And he has the audacity, and I think rightly so, to call out some of the false reporting that's in this or some of the mediocre reporting, which is why we have, and we don't have time to talk about it today, but you know this, we reformed the Directorate of Intelligence. That's rolling out this year. We're sending 1,000 more personnel out into the field to support the staff and support operations. But it's intelligence driven. We started the program talking about intel, and it's a good place to end the program. But the president's daily briefing is directed by President Trump, and that's what led to this success.
Those reforms are really important. I don't think a lot of that information's filtered out yet. The reforms you made structurally to the FBI and the intel front after, obviously, the abomination of Crossfire, those are really, really critical. Those are going to institute some guardrails. But without good people in charge, as you know, guardrails are just, people can jump over them. Director Patel, was a real honor to work for you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the, allowing us to work, summer heat, the drop in crime. The country's a lot safer, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Hope to have you back.
Dan, I'm glad to be back, and I just want to let your audience know this historic year, obviously not possible without President Trump, but definitely not possible without you as a deputy director. We missed you, and we're glad you're back on the air, though, and we'll look forward to coming back soon.
Thank you, my friend. Director Kash Patel.